We have to take our power back. And if we can get just 3% of the global 8.4 billion people in this world to convert their garbage fiat into sound money, I think we have a shot.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Welcome to Live from the Vault, brought to you by Kinesis Money. Now, this is the show that goes beyond the headlines to uncover the truth about the gold and silver markets with world-renowned whistleblower and industry expert, Mr. Andrew Maguire. And this week, he'll be joined by our very special featured guest, Lynette Zang of Zang Enterprises. And if you haven't already checked out her YouTube channel, we'll leave a link down below there in the description, and be sure to do that. Now, we're talking gold and silver, and you're not going to want to miss a second of this conversation. So let's head over to the UK and join Andrew Maguire and our featured guest, Lynette Zang. Over to you, Andrew.
Well, absolutely, what a buzz. Lynette, it's been a year. I cannot believe it's been a year since we've actually shared. Well, it'd be nice to share bread, but it's kind of like sharing bread because it's there we are. We can see each other. I can sense the energy. You know what? One of the things that really, really struck me last time you were here with us was you were so specialized in some of the things you talk about, and you've surrounded yourself with all the things that I think we want to talk about here. But we were talking about, I think we kind of left off we were talking about the life cycle expectations of this debt-backed fiat system, which already died in 2008. And then you were then saying, well, you know what, let's talk about how we can help people smooth out this transition. And I think this was really interesting. I had so much feedback about that. But thank you for joining us and picking up the thread.
I am very happy to be here. And also on that trip, it was really nice to get to talk to you in person. And that, it seems to me like every time I go to Australia, I elevate to a new level. I learn lots of new things. And that trip with you was no different. And one of the things that I did begin to realize, because we had brought silver over, because I realized that if people have never held sound money in their hand, and we're talking about sound money, they really have no concept of what that is. Because remember, here in the US, I'm not sure about in England, but here in the US, they took silver, sound money silver, out of the monetary system in 1965. So anybody that was born, I was what, 11 then, because I was born in 54. So I remember having silver in the monetary system, and I remember when President Johnson took it away from us. But anybody that was born after that, they have no concept. And so we had brought 1 ounce pieces, and we were handing them out and having these conversations, and it was really interesting. And what I actually realized is that, yeah, we were onto something by getting silver in people's hands, right? But we weren't doing it quite the right way. So we kind of pulled back for a second. And we've created, actually, we can even send you one if we have your address. I don't have them here. But we created these little quarter cards where we have like a pre-1965 silver quarter and a new quarter. And because this is how they make the transitions. They keep things looking the same. So people don't think that anything has changed when actually everything has changed. But what you can't see here, but I'll hold it up anyway. If you look on the edge of the coin, you can see that the pre-65 coin is just all silver. Whereas anything after 65, there is that line of a copper color showing that it's just garbage base metal. So this is worth, well, There's only 3 cents left out of the dollar officially. So this is a quarter, right? And you go to the grocery store, you're going to spend it as a quarter. But when we actually, this is probably with where spot is right now, probably about $6, something like that. Why? Because it maintains its purchasing power because it's used in every single sector of the global economy. Demand in one place, demand every place. So we've been on that campaign to frankly get silver. We're giving it away, but we get silver in people's hands and then give them the tools to understand what's happening because we have the same thing happening today, transitioning us from a debt-based system into a digital system. And this is a visual representation of Bitcoin. And my goodness, doesn't it look an awful like this 1-ounce gold coin,
It does.
right? And it's sold as digital gold. But this again is used in one place. This is used in every sector of the global economy. This uses up the energy that it takes to create it, and it takes a lot. This uses that energy, but because this is indestructible and used in every single sector of the economy, this same energy can be used over and over and over an infinite number of times because this can be melted down and used in space travel, in food, just not just the financial system, in medicine, in electronics. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. For both gold and silver, like diamonds, they've figured out how to create those in a lab, but they have never been able to duplicate the properties that gold and silver have. So they have to continue to be used for those properties. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's supply and demand, which we're seeing unfold in the physical in the markets right now of the backwardation between of gold and silver in these markets. So yeah, there's a lot to it. And I'm glad that you brought that up because we should not be fooled. That's just to ensnare us, to entrap us. We need to be our own sovereign entity and have a foundation of sound money that is decentralized, opaque, and private, yet used everywhere. So the most liquid assets on earth.
I think what I love about this is because what we're doing here, or what you're doing really essentially, is saying, look, here's your solution. It's not like here's the problem and woe is all of us. No, here's your problem, but here's your solution. And I think that is the most important part. And you held up the silver quarter and you held up the ordinary quarter. I mean, what's the other one going to ever buy you today? What would it even buy you? Nothing. Zero. I mean, they laugh at you for trying to spend it. And the same here with, just say pick up a single sovereign. I mean, in 1933, I'd go to a bank and I'd get £1 back for my sovereign. Now it's £800. But as you say, nothing changed. This didn't change at all. And yet, by having people who have accrued these are literally protecting this debasement of the currencies. All it is just costing more freshly printed pounds in this case to buy the same thing. You're talking about the same thing. I love that. I want one. I want one of those.
Because that's true. And, you brought up debasement, and it has been astounding to me that over the last few weeks, that is all the talk on these talking heads on Wall Street, on Bloomberg, on CNBC, and the Wall Street Journal, and all the debasement trade. Like, that's a good thing. It's crazy. I was watching Bloomberg this morning, and NVIDIA is the very first $5 trillion company. Well, there is not one doubt in my mind, because I know we're at the end of this cycle, that we've entered the melt up phase. Is NVIDIA really worth $5 trillion, or is the dollar worth that much less? Because this is what we've seen in every single country. I'm going to do a whole piece on it, but in every single country that has gone through a hyperinflationary event, Venezuela, they had the best performing stock market in 2012, 13, 14, I think 15. I'd have to go back and look. But they were also in a hyper and continue, their currency continues in trouble, but they were in hyperinflation. So people fly to the only choices they think they have, the fiat money intangible choices, and those go up. But the problem is if you can only convert it into the currency, right? And that currency doesn't buy you anything. It's the purchasing power value. That's the real trend. I mean, this is my $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. So I am a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, but I can buy nothing with this, right? What good does it do? But this, I can go anywhere in the world. And I do. When I travel, I have this stuff with me, because if I ever get in trouble and I need a local currency just like that, I can convert this anywhere in the world for that local currency. Can I convert this to anything at all? No. A 10 trillion times zero is still zero.
I mean, even if you got stranded in, in a conflict zone, and who's going to take a dollar when, if you can offer a gold coin, it'll buy you passage, maybe a freighter or something, but it'll buy you passage. It is your freedom. It is, and really that kind of builds us on to what you are very, very big on, and that is self-sufficiency. That was really struck my heart. That is so important, because very few people, I mean, they want to take responsibility for themselves, but don't know how. Just don't know how to go about it. I mean, and it's that there's so much, you're fighting so many headwinds. And that's one of the big things that you, where people come and land on your site, they land on your system, and they have the ability then to learn the various ways of doing that. And I know we talked about some of that last time. Blew my mind, because we're talking about caring for the people around you, talking about that wider view. Maybe talk a little bit about, say somebody lands on your site and they're just saying, well, yeah, okay, I want to take I understand gold and silver, yeah, but what's the bigger picture? How do I actually be self-sufficient?
That is really such a great question. I'm so glad that you asked that, because we do need to, and time is growing very short. But as you said earlier, the system died in 2008, and there was no doubt in my mind. And so at that point, I went ahead and I was in a little two-bedroom condominium and getting ready to retire. So I could just lock the door and off I go. And 2008 happened, and that changed that changed everything for me. And so instead, what I did was I bought a property, and it's a half an acre. So it's not very big, but in central Phoenix, which is where I am, and I became an urban farmer. I was never a gardener. I mean, that's not really the nature of who I am. But all of my studies about the economy, I knew that the biggest issue for most people was food. And being a mother, quite honestly, I don't want to see anybody hungry. If I could feed the world, I would. And so I knew that what I had to do was create food abundance. And I also knew that my daughters, who also live in Phoenix, would not be going anywhere away with me, right? So I decided to make my last stand in flipping central Phoenix. And that put me on a quest and that's what created that whole mantra, so that I could sustain a reasonable standard of living. And here's the mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And you need all of those things to lead a reasonable standard of living through this transition. And dare I say it, even put you and your family in a better position on the other side of this mess. But we don't have that luxury of time like I've had working on this since 2008 and really building my portfolio since 2002. So I've been working on this a long time, and I would say that I'm probably more prepared than most anybody that I know. And yet I would like more time to get even more prepared. So that's where community, which again, going back to Australia, it was September of 2023 when I went to Australia and I did a show there. And I got up to the podium and it was with our friends at Good as Gold. And I got up to the podium and I threw all of the material that I had prepared for this away. And I said, you know what? You can all have it. And if you want to see my work, go to the YouTube channel. But what I really want to talk to you about is community. And Andrew, as soon as I did that, and I'm getting chills now, I got chills from the tip of my head to the bottom of my feet. Because even though community was part of the mantra, and there are things I'm just kind of guided to do, it wasn't a big part of the mantra, right? Like I never really talked about it. But realizing that we all have to come together first in local. So this is the tip for everybody. Please pay attention to this. We are running out of time. Come together in local community. You can go to a farmer's market. You can go to a community garden. Give them a day of your time. You will learn some skills. You will start to create that relationship to create surety in all of those areas. Because what a community really does is they bring together all of the gifts that they have, whether it's skills or it's assets or it's ideas, it's your whatever it is, there is power in numbers, and we have to create that surety. We have been trained away from that. Most people, I mean, when I first started putting these gardens in and these trees in, my neighbors were kind of upset about that because after all, somebody might walk by and now I'm going to have all these homeless in the neighborhood and blah, blah, blah. Well, people don't know what real food looks like growing in a garden, right? Because you go to the grocery store, everything looks perfect.
Yeah.
That's not what it looks like in nature. But I do know that since food is the biggest issue, and I also know that desperate people do desperate things, and if they can't feed their families, okay, they start to get desperate. So my neighbors know, and people walking by, they know they can pick a pomegranate, they can pick a zucchini, they can feed their families because we can't live without food and we can't live without water. You can live without gold and silver because, well, you can actually eat them, and I have I have actually eaten gold and silver flakes, mind you, not coins. And you can buy things with it, but really this is your foundation, but you need all those other pieces. And frankly, I just don't think we have the time left to do that on our own. Like I've been working on it so hard and so diligently for so long. Yeah. It's critically important that you become as self-sufficient and independent inside of community. You need to create that. And globally, which is what our trip was about when we got to see each other in Australia, is about building that global community to demand sound money, redeemable gold. I am really all about redeemable gold because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And if they just say it's pegged, like we've seen in Zimbabwe, it means nothing, nothing. We have to take our power back. And if we can get just 3% of the global 8.4 billion people in this world to convert their garbage fiat into sound money, I think we have a shot at getting redeemable gold back in the system. Maybe I'm out of my mind. Because when a well-packaged web of lies has been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth seems outrageous and the speaker a raving lunatic, and I am very happy to be that lunatic.
Well, I think that, I mean, that this is so important. We're talking about community, but we're also talking about interdependence. And I think there's, people don't sometimes don't get the difference. And it is so important because, as you say, when you go and give some time to a neighbor, or, maybe an elderly neighbor or something or another, you're building a relationship. Now, the value of that is beyond money. And then what you're talking about is people then get to know, oh, right, that's a friendly situation to come in. And people are not scared to ask you stuff. And then, because they don't feel, and so it's really important. And I think, we talk about gold and silver yet, and we will continue to talk about gold and silver, but this is so important. It's about building that community, is the interdependence to what's the point? I mean, take a wild example. So, if I'm Elon Musk and I've got billions, but there's only me, what's the point of it all? It's just pointless.
Thank you. I agree with that. And the other part that you just brought up is, sound money, you're trading labor for labor because it takes labor to pull this out of the ground. And the relationship that you were talking about is also trading labor for labor. You're helping a neighbor, you're helping a farmer, you're going in, you're learning a new skill, you're creating that relationship, and you are going back to a sound system where it's fair. Trading labor for labor is fair. The system we're in right now trades debt for labor. That's not fair. And I listen to these politicians, or I listen to these talking heads on TV, and the politicians are talking about regulations, 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 which of course is garbage anyway. That's not what's going to fix the system. I was listening to Jane Fonda this morning and talking about climate change, and that is critically important. I'm not negating that. Well, what's going to fix the system is sound money in it, because then the public will have their power back. You don't here. This was the first money. Then they came out with these gold certificates, and you can see that little gold thing to make you think that they were the same thing. And you could walk into the bank with this, and you could walk out with this. But at the same time, and I have all the evidence. You want any of these charts? I'll give you the links. At the same time, they converted, so this was 1914, they converted corporate debt into, bam, Federal Reserve notes. And all three of these, with a stated value of $20, was allowed to be used at the same time. So people got used to it, right? Then in 33, when they took these two away, we still had that. And so people go, well, nothing has changed, because they got used to it for 20 years. In this digital system, it came out in 2009. Bitcoin was born in January. Quantitative easing was born in March. Coincidence? Probably not. Probably not. But how many years have we now had? And the level of adoption, and the fact, and this is probably about the most important thing that I'm going to say today, is that when President Trump signed the Genius Act and legalized stable coins, boy, oh boy, it took my mind right back to 1914, because we now have these private corporations and governments and cities, and anybody can issue stable coins. There's no limitations on that. But you have corporations like Amazon, and what are they going to do? They're issuing stable coins. That, I believe, President Trump, when he signed that Genius Act, changed the global monetary system. Whether anybody realizes it or not, that's the first piece of legislation that actually legalized this surveillance money. But what it also did, I think you and I have talked about this. And I used to say, well, right now in this system, debt justifies that. So in this new system, what's going to justify the money creation? And everything that I had read was either debt or purchases. Well, with the legalization of stable coins, my question has now been answered. And the answer is both. Because when me as a consumer is inspired by Amazon with all these extra benefits and cheap and this and that and the other thing to convert my dollars into stable coins, and then Amazon has to go out and on a one-to-one basis, so they'll do a discount, right? A one-to-one basis, buy treasuries to back those stable coins with dollars, which creates an artificial market. But that is what's going to usher in the necessary hyperinflation to get rid of the debt so they can start over. And also, the speed, because with AI, knowing your habits, knowing who you are, how you think, nudging you, you're holding all of your wealth on your phone. By 2030, you will own nothing, just like the World Economic Forum says.
And you just raised something really interesting here about stablecoins. Now, the US Treasury, and this is more than talk because it's been trial ballooned a few times now. The US Treasury may try to back its 38 trillion of debt. Now, 38 trillion, as you and I know, is only what's official. Maybe it could be 70. I don't know. But to back this 38 trillion of debt with freshly generated dollar-backed treasury stablecoins. What are they going to do? What they're attempting to do is dump US debt on every other country. But there's a flaw in that. There's a flaw in that because, you can force people to use it because you've got the world's global currency. So you can force, and essentially because a stablecoin can be issued by anybody, not just the US Treasury. So you're competing. It's suddenly you've got this debt sort of lumbered on everyone else. But the only thing is, the one thing they haven't really thought through is China says, hang on, you can actually convert a yuan stable coin, but a yuan stable coin into physical gold 1-to-1. So if I'm now forced to buy my oil or whatever it might be using these stable coins and they want to dump their debt on me, I just turn around, to flip it into a yuan, and immediately demand that be 1-to-1 redeemed in gold and vaulted for me. It's not going to work. This whole plan it's simply hitting a physical wall.
Well, Andrew, you said something that I was not aware of, so I got to look at that because I was not. I mean, yes, any country we've got the Hong Kong dollar, or the Hong Kong dollar stable coin, the Chinese yuan stable coin. It's going to be, and it already is, a very fragmented market, which creates a whole lot of vulnerabilities. But I was not aware that that they set it up where you could immediately convert the yuan stablecoin into gold.
Well, basically the yuan into gold. You can 1-to-1 convert, so you can buy oil or you can buy a product or sell a product or whatever it is, buy and sell a product. Whatever you end up, if you end up with yuan, you can immediately 1-to-1 convert that into physical gold and take physical delivery in a Western-facing SGE international vault, of which there are already two. There's Hong Kong and Singapore, and then you've got them opening up in all across Africa. You've got them opening up in Zurich, South America. So all of a sudden, this dollar dilution game is actually hitting a physical wall, and it's like China. I mean, I'm not saying the China regime is perfect or good or bad. I'm just saying these guys have worked out, we're not getting saddled with this. And you start threatening us with tariffs. You start threatening us with flip-flop tariffs. and try to control us with sanctions, as you did with Russia, etc. We've got the gold. In fact, 80,000 tons. Most of us are connected to the physical market. Say China has 80,000 tons. Russia, Saudi, India, 30,000 tons. So you're talking 110,000 tons of gold. Who's controlling the market now? Who's the boss?
He who holds the gold holds the wealth and holds the value and controls everything at the end of the day. And to your point, why is it that we are seeing global central bank and they don't report everything? If you think even the level of gold that they're accumulating is being accurately reported, to your earlier point about China, who no gold leaves that country. If you're going to China, you better report it on the way in because you ain't taking it on the way out. So yes, there is a major shift that's happening. But remember too, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. They have to hyperinflate away all of the debt because China's not in any better shape on their debt.
No,
And
right.
also to your point that they admit to, the system is dead. And so we need a major hyperinflationary depression on a global basis to reset into the new system. And of course, when one system dies, another one is born. It's that gold and silver hold your purchasing power intact, which also then puts you in a position to take advantage of opportunities along the way. And then you're on the other side of it, and you've got all this purchasing power, all of this wealth that you've accumulated when it was severely undervalued, like gold and silver still is, even at these levels. And people look at the spot markets as a contract that really, and they go, woohoo. You won't hear me going, woohoo, because it's still severely undervalued, since a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency.
Mm.
But, you know, I do a live every week, and of course we saw spot gold and spot silver, and I always need to say that in front so people understand I'm not really talking about the physical markets. I am talking about those contract markets that people have been taught to believe is the value of gold and silver. And I don't know, we'll take this question, maybe you can answer it. I don't know why people still trust Wall Street. I mean, you get burned over and over and over again, but, oh, yeah, they're giving you good information. But you want to be in a position where you have your freedom. That's what having physical gold and silver in your possession does. And if you have all of those other things secure and the government says jump, you get to say, nope. If you are you were talking about interdependent, that's a good thing. We have become, or what they've positioned us for, to be codependent, right? That's not a good thing in a surveillance system. And that's what the stable coins are. CBDCs, bad word in the US, stable coin, same thing. Doesn't matter. They're the same thing. You know, if the government says jump and you are codependent on the government for everything, so all your wealth is intangible, you know, and you don't know how to grow your own food or anything or water, etc., then you're going to have to do whatever it is that they tell you to do. Or not. Nope, you can't do this. Yep. Oh, you said that. We picked that up on social media. Up, you're blocked. I mean, look at what happened in Canada, for God's sakes. And here in the US, we don't really look at Canada a whole lot different than we look at ourselves. And when they had that perfectly legal and peaceful trucker strike, boom, cut out of the system. You donated $5 to one of those truckers so they could eat that day, boom, you were cut out of the system. Is that what we want for our children?
No. And I think when you're talking about a social credit system here, where it's decided for you, hang on a minute, you've used all your carbon up for this year. No, so you go up to buy your airplane flight, and they say, well, it just won't go through. Why? Because they've frozen it. Or you go down and you want to buy meat. Well, no, you've eaten your share of meat already. So these things, and that's happening. I mean, I spoke to in our last episode, we spoke to it's a really smart silver miner, and he said he's Chinese, and he said, you know what, in China there are people who are homeless simply because they've tweeted something, they've said something against the government, and they're no longer able to even live in an apartment building, and they're homeless. So we know it happens, we know it's enacted, and in this country, unfortunately, we have a communist regime that has blatantly communist regime, Marxist, and that basically now, if I was Lynette, if I was to actually put a meme out against the current prime minister, and I could easily have 4 or 5 policemen at my door, not one, several at my door, for a non-hate crime, and I'd be processed, but not arrested, but just intimidated. Now, that's the first stage. That's the first stage. Once you've got a social credit system and you are reliant on it, they won't even bother. They're just literally, why doesn't my computer work? Why doesn't my lights work? And so this is where we're headed. And I think the only solution is what you're talking about. You need to have independent currency. You need to have gold and silver. It's the ultimate barter tool. It always has been a barter tool. And you may be fortunate to have a garden and you may have some chickens, and you might say, I need a trench digging. So I'll give you that chicken if you dig this trench this long. And so, yeah, that's the old barter system. But not everyone has in a position to do that. So what's the ultimate barter system? It is gold and silver, and probably silver.
Right, because it's smaller for barter. But to your point, that is why we have to get redeemable gold back in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because, look, back in the day when we had that, and if I didn't like what the government or the central bank was doing, I could walk in with this and walk out with this, and that forced fiscal responsibility. The public, had the power, which frankly, in the US Constitution, it was supposed to be the individual at the head, and then the states were supposed to support the individual's rights, and then the federal government was supposed to support the states that was supposed to support the individual's right. That's all been flip-flopped. And it's all about the federal government and the growth and the power that they have over an individual's life. We have to take our power back. And the only way that we can do that is by having a sound money system where you are fairly paid. They cannot inflate, because, when they set this system up, if people ever took the time to go in and read the documentations when they're setting things up, I mean, it's public records, anybody can read it. And what they said, there were a few things that were shocking to me, but this was so shocking. Number one, governments wanted to be able to tax the people without going through legislation so that you didn't know about it. On a gold and silver standard, you couldn't do that. On a fiat money standard, it's that inflation tax that used to be a bad word. Inflation used to be a bad word. Now, no, not a bad word. And debasement trade, awesome. But so governments wanted to do that. Corporations wanted to pay their workers less. But hey, if you're used to getting $20, you're not going to accept 10. However, if inflation makes that $20 spend like 10, and then the rest of that goes up to the top, this big K-shaped recovery, the income and wealth inequality, there you go. Inflation and the fiat money system solved it. And it was corporate debt that were turned into our money, for goodness sakes. And so really, voila, inflation solved it. And what they actually said when they were putting this system together, if people have to work longer and harder to sustain their current standard of living, they will have less time to pay attention to what we are doing. with the monetary system. Do you know how angry I get over that? I mean, goodness gracious, how many times can you be lied to when you do not know the truth?
It's incredible.
Gold, silver, this is honest money. It's simple. It's not complicated. The digital currencies, I mean, this garbage, and I think it's interesting that they make them all. They have no physical body, but they all make them gold, silver, or platinum, right? So that's about perception management. But when you're looking at this stuff, what does it do? Can you are you the kind of engineer that can go into all of this source code and determine if what they're doing is truly in your best interest? I'm not. I can tell you right now, I have no clue. Gold and silver, it's simple to understand. It's used in every single sector of the global economy. It's clean, it stores energy, and it can be used over and well, not silver because it gets used up, but gold can be used over and over an infinite number of times. That's pretty supply and demand, easy peasy understanding. The system that we're in right now, no, it is not easy to understand. And they know that most people do not understand inflation, so they can get away with it.
Yeah.
In the '70s, I was there when Nixon took us fully off the gold standard, and I can tell you, I remember the inflation, and I remember all the chaos around that transition, and I remember the energy, and I'm feeling the same thing. We are transitioning, and I hope people see that already, and they've already put in that next piece to take us to the big enough crisis to justify the shift, which will not be, if we don't do something about it, it will not be in our best interest. And I don't care about me. I'm old. We were talking about that earlier, right? I mean, I'm old. I'm going to be around maybe another 29 years because I think I'm going to live to be 100. So, but I am worried about my children who are in their 40s and my grandchildren who are in their teens and the children that they're going to bring into this world down the road and on and on and on. This is not what I want for my heirs and for your heirs or for anybody's heirs. It's horrendous. It's back in the feudal times.
Well, I think one thing that gives me a little bit of hope in the US is that the sound money movement is, and I connect with two or three of these guys that, and we've done interviews with them and one thing and another. They're really good people, but it seems like under your constitution, you can actually connect. Gold is money still, technically. So really, I think several states now have either got legislation through or are seeking to get legislation through where gold is money and it can be redeemed with no taxes involved in one, which is part of the problem, of course, is that it's tax
Form
free.
of confiscation, isn't it?
So that is hopeful in the sense. Have you got any sense about how that movement, whether that movement is gaining enough traction to really sort of put a dent in this whole plan, digital ID plan, or digital central bank digital currency plan?
Well, actually, I do sit on the board of the Sound Money movement. And actually, we are integrating even more at our location here in Phoenix. And they were just here last weekend. So we had this conversation and we're approaching it from a ground up. And so really when I was traveling recently in Malaysia and in Cambodia, we brought little dime cards and we passed them out and helped people. We began to help people understand this is a tenth of an ounce of roughly a tenth of an ounce of silver. This is nothing, right? So yeah, it's like from the bottom up, from the state level, because I think if we can get enough states to participate, then we have an opportunity to go to the federal government, but also from the top down, where this is a global sound money movement. One country alone, no. we really need this adopted on a global basis. And so that's why I travel as much as I do. And boy, do I hand I hand out a lot of silver and talk to a lot of people. And I'm hoping this hasn't happened yet, but I am so confident that this is going to happen. At some point, handing out all of that silver and getting those people just to kind of start paying attention a little differently. This will catch fire. And if enough people do this, they won't have any choice because there's power in numbers. And you've got the 1% versus the 99%. We can be, and we are, if we come together, stronger than the governments. And we see that on a global basis. We do see a rise in populism. We see a rise in protests, government protests on a global basis. So kind of approaching it everywhere. We don't need to be violent. We can do it quite peacefully and simply just by converting your fiat into physical gold and silver. That's all. You're helping yourself, but you're also helping everybody else in the world, because I do believe that it is our obligation as human beings on this planet to share the gifts that we have been given. That means our understandings, our talents, who we are, everything. And we have to come together and make that happen, or the alternative, we're not going to like the alternative. I'm telling you right now, we're not going to like it.
So conceivably, you could have two prices. You could have a sound money price based upon gold and silver, and you could have then if I was then saying, well, look, hold on, you want to give me dollars, but here's the stable coin price. Sorry, here's the sound money price, but that dollar bill that you've just given me is going to cost me X to refine and put into that stable coin that is actually safe, secure, and has zero counterparty risk. So there's a fee to taking zero counterparty risk and putting it into a zero counterparty risk, so high counterparty risk into a zero counterparty risk coin or currency, basically. So I can see if there's enough people behind this, you'd say, well, okay, yeah, you want to pay me in dollars. It's higher. It's going to cost you more dollars, actually. So it would be an interesting situation, what you're describing.
Well, you know what? We actually see that situation in some of the countries like Venezuela, where you'll go in and they will have a price for food or whatever it is in gold and also in bolivars.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
So yeah, we're already seeing that in countries that are experiencing the hyperinflation, where the gold and the silver, they can cut off because frankly, gold and silver in any form, this happens to be a sterling silver chopstick, but gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base. Would I give a crap about cutting off a little piece of this chopstick to buy a loaf of bread? No, I wouldn't care about that at all. But it's kind of easier to do it with, tenth of an ounce ish. This is 90% silver. So it's not. It's just easier to think that this is roughly a tenth of an ounce. This is roughly a quarter of an ounce. This is roughly a half an ounce. And this is roughly an ounce, right? So this is kind of easier. But gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base.
Well, I mean, that says it all, isn't it? I mean, honestly, I mean, that's full circle. I mean, this is absolutely, it is the only thing that anyone should be thinking about right now is how do I, first of all, the first thing is, how do I protect what wealth I have right now? So it's not a question of, let's buy gold and silver to make money. That's not what we're talking about. As you've clearly pointed out, that's not what we're talking about. First of all, you need to protect your wealth so that you can then build strength with you and your community, all doing the same thing. Then you are a powerhouse. Then you are creating your own You're taking your own collective responsibilities and creating something of massive value.
Exactly. And I will say, look, I've been studying currencies, as you know, currencies and currency life cycles since 1987. And there are all these repeatable patterns. So at Zhang Enterprises, we have a strategy that is based upon those repeatable patterns, but it's built in layers, right? So you would have something like this. This for me, this is just a raw, just a 1 ounce coin. I'm in the US, so it happens to be a pre-1933 coin to give me an extra layer of protection should there be an overt confiscation. And this is what I consider my emergency money. This is my savings account because I have a lot of employees. If for some reason I need to pay them and something happens to my bank account, boom, I can cash this in, right? So this is emergency savings anytime. But then so part of the strategy, the first part of the strategy is to give you different kinds of money, including cash that it's losing all of its value, but that's the most recognizable. So you have a layer of cash, maybe some Kinesis gold, right? For that first layer of liquidity. And they also sit on the Sound Money Movement Advisory Board.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we
They
do.
do. Yep, you do. And maybe even some gold backs, which I don't think you have them there, but this particular bill is embedded with 1/1000th of an ounce of gold, and then your barterable position. So all this raw stuff for different reasons. Then the next layer of the strategy is about taking all of that intangible wealth that you've accumulated, maybe in a retirement plan or personal account, whatever. And we want to make sure that that's properly diversified. So if that goes away, no problem, you're covered. And then you're put in a position where you can take advantage of opportunities that present, because we've seen quite clearly that there have been targeted things for reflation. So income producing real estate, even solid stocks. Who knows who's a zombie? Who knows who's going to survive this? But we will know in due time. We will know who will survive this mess. And so right now they're up at nosebleed levels, whereas gold and silver is severely undervalued. That's going to flip flop, right? And when that flip flop occurs, then you want your purchasing power to convert into those other assets. And then you've got your maybe legacy. I mean, that's important to me, but that's not important to everybody else. And then beyond that, you want to make sure that you have purchasing power intact to convert into whatever that new currency is on the other side of it. So it's a very layered approach that looks short term, intermediate term, and long term, but it is not a trading portfolio. And I want to make that clear because that comes up. We've been trained very short term thinking, and to trade. You do not trade with physical metals, period.
Do you know, I think this is important. So Lynette, if somebody has, I mean, everyone has their own unique situation. So can people interact directly with you and literally say, look, here's my situation. And so you could then perhaps steer them in the right direction. Obviously, you have all these. I mean, you have some amazing. You produce some amazing product anyway, like YouTube videos. You're picking up salient things that are going on. You're picking up the threads of things that are current, which is tremendously interesting. But then, for somebody who really wants to look, I've got some savings here, and I've got a this and that and the other. So, but I don't know quite how to go about it. So they can speak to you directly, can they?
Well, they don't usually talk to me personally, but they do speak to me directly through our strategy specialists who all understand the strategy and can definitely point them in the right direction, because it starts with your goals and then your circumstances and what you have to work with. But again, it's going to be a layered approach. So, in many ways, Andrew, you would be executing the same strategy as I am, but tweaked to where you are and what your goals are versus me. Because, like I said earlier, leaving a legacy is very important to me for my family, but that's not important to everybody, right? So, it isn't one size fits all, but the foundation is the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. So people get, and people can see what you're doing and what other people around you are doing, and as you say, you can then fit yourself within those parameters. And everyone's got this unique situation, but it kind of all boils down to the same thing, which is really one of the you're distilling it down to the real actionable points. And I think that's is it. Most people want to take responsibility, but how do you go about it? What actionable points can you draw on? And obviously, gold and silver, you've made nobody had made that point better than you, and how important that is. And it's not about trading. This is about taking a responsibility for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your community. Lynette, thank you for sharing that, because not everyone talks about that kind of stuff. Not everyone goes that next level. And I think this is going to resonate with an awful lot of people because we all have a good heart. You know what I mean? It's like, look, if you're fortunate enough to be in an Italian family and you've got your grandmother and your family and you've got kids and grandkids, maybe with 50, 20, 30 people around you as a family, it's a lot easier because, you're sharing this wealth of knowledge, of history, of all these stories that, and common sense that the common sense that comes out of a relationship like that. But we've kind of people have become insular. They've been, you got your house and you got your neighbor and you got this and you got that and the other. And it's like, so you kind of, but who do you connect with? And it's important to create that. What you're saying is if you don't have it, create it. And you can do that.
Easily. You can actually easily do it, and the point that you just brought up was where generations it used to be that generations were together and everybody had a job, but they all were able to share the wisdom. So you basically had your community, and then even within a community, in the US, there were barn raises, right? So the neighbors would come and they would help you do what you needed to do, and then when they needed help, you would go. But in the US, and actually this too was by design, and they had written about it prior to the 70s where, you had, and look, I've worked my whole life. My mother worked her whole life. So it isn't whether or not you can work. But the mother used to be the heart of the home. And the kids came home and mom was there and they had a snack and they did this and it was a cohesive family unit like you were talking about, and maybe there'd be generations. But they needed us separate, right? So divide and conquer. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, was that tested in COVID, right?
Mm.
And and I can tell you, I think this is also happening all over the world, but we are so polarized now. If you don't think the way I think, I hate your guts and I will do damage. No, 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 no. On Tuesdays, I do a live, and I do a live Q&A. And so somebody that only believes in cryptos or might have some negative things would come in and I answer all the questions. I don't care whether they're trying to be snotty or whatever. That's fine with me. But when they would say something like that, the others in the group would kind of jump on top of them. And I would say, no, no, no. This is not a cult where you just have one way of thinking. This is a community where everybody needs to be heard. You don't have to agree with them.
Yeah.
That's not the important part, but I want all voices, even when they're trying to be whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what happens in a family. You all don't think alike, right? But you can still love each other. You can still be there for each other. You can still help each other. We have to come together locally and globally. We've got to thwart their plans because I'm telling you, you read the documentation, divide and conquer. If people are not coming together and talking about what's happening, they just create this whatever scenario in their heads and they have nobody or nowhere to bounce that off of. We have to change that trajectory. That's a horrible trajectory. We need to change that again for the future. And I believe we can do it. I really do.
Well, I think you've laid out the solution, and it's available to anybody. And so, Lynette, I thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. I mean, it's valuable. I do honestly, yeah, you've showed up gold and silver. I think there's some stuff there that needs listening to more than once. And I think, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing this. And believe me, it isn't going to be a year if you're okay to come back, maybe in the new year, and let's have a look and see exactly where we are and what progress we've all made. Sound money, whatever it is, what progress are we making? Are we collectively making a difference? Are we on the right road to making that difference? And I think the key thing is start gold and silver now, today, because it's there. Anyone can do that. I mean, I can pick up the phone and have it delivered to my door, from bullion by post or someone. It's available to do. But thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. It is really, really well appreciated. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Live from the Vault, brought to you by Kinesis Money. Now, a huge thanks to Andrew Maguire and our featured guest, Lynette Zang. I knew you'd like that conversation, for cutting through the noise and sharing insights that you just won't find anywhere else. Now, if you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed now. Turn on that notification so you never miss out on one of these episodes. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who really needs to hear the real story behind the headlines. Now, we're back soon with more hard-hitting truths from inside the precious metal space. And until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Live from the Vault. Bye for now.